Just released brand new video and photos shedding light on the final moments before Sudiksha Konanki vanished on spring break. The person of interest in her missing persons case is being kept in the Dominican Republic. His passport seized by authorities. What he just told a reporter about the girl he was last seen with. We're on the case, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. Before we get started today, I want to bring you up to speed on a new project we're working on here at Law&Crime. It's a new YouTube channel called Scandal. And if you can guess by the name, this is all about exposing the dark side of fame. It will be bringing to light the wild and disturbing crimes that happen in Hollywood behind closed doors. So if this sounds like something that's up your alley, click the link in the description and start to get all the latest on the scandals of Hollywood. All right, let's turn to this story that we've been following on the case now for more than a week. The missing persons case in the Dominican Republic, that of Sudiksha Konanki, the 20-year-old University of Pittsburgh student who vanished while on spring break. And we learn the person of interest in her case, Joshua Riibe, has had his passport taken by Dominican authorities. Now, before we get to that part of the story, I want to show you new surveillance video that has been released. This is per Dominican media outlet Noticias SIN, and it shows Sudiksha and Joshua Riibe at the resort's bar just before Sudiksha went missing. And you can see here the person in the cutoff tee in the back there, that is Riibe reportedly throwing up. Then a little later in the video, you see the person with their arm around the pole, that is identified as Sudiksha. And you can see while they both are throwing up in this video, they're close to each other in the bar. They don't seem to interact at all. We know that Riibe said to investigators that he first met Sudiksha and her friends the night she went missing at the Rio Republica Hotel bar. That's where they were staying. Then the whole friend group decided to go to the bar. This is the timeline that Riibe reportedly gave investigators during one of his interviews with law enforcement in the Dominican Republic. A transcript of that interview was leaked to members of the media. Riibe said when they were in the lobby, someone in the group then suggested they go to the bar. Then when they were at the bar, someone suggested they go to the beach. This surveillance video from Noticias SIN shows the group making their way to the ocean at 4:15 in the morning on March 6th. And you can see in this video, Riibe has his arms around Sudiksha. Most of the people in the group return to the hotel at 5:55 a.m., leaving Sudiksha and Riibe on the beach, out of sight of cameras, and we haven't seen Sudiksha since. Now, it's unclear what her friends, who she went on spring break with, told investigators, or if they've been questioned as intensely as Riibe has been. And we can only confirm that they reported her missing. Now, before we return to that timeline that the surveillance video shows us and also what Riibe told investigators, here's some more new surveillance video that Noticias SIN released that shows Sudiksha and her friends in the hotel lobby the night she disappeared. Now, this video doesn't really tell us much about what Sudiksha went through that night, but you do see her wearing that white cover-up, and that is a very key piece of evidence for law enforcement. Riibe says that when he and Sudiksha were on the beach alone, they were kissing in the water, then they were hit by a big wave. Riibe told Dominican investigators that when he and Sudiksha were pulled out to the water into the ocean, they tried to swim back. And he said, quote, "I was holding her under my arm and swimming to get her out of the water." The investigator asked, quote, "What happened next?" Riibe replied, quote, "It took me a long time to get her out. It was hard. I've been a lifeguard in pools, not in the sea. I was trying to make sure she kept breathing at all times. I couldn't breathe the whole time and swallowed a lot of water. I could have passed out several times. When I finally touched the ground on the beach, I placed her in front of me." Riibe then says Sudiksha got up to grab her belongings and walked at an angle along the beach in knee-deep water. He says that he asked if she was okay as she walked away, but he didn't hear her answer because he says at that moment, he started throwing up all the seawater that he had swallowed swimming to safety. When he finished vomiting, he looked up and Sudiksha was gone. He then says that he felt exhausted from that swim and he laid down on a beach chair and fell asleep. And it wasn't until the sun came up the next morning and he was being bit by mosquitoes that he said he woke up. This again is from that transcript that was leaked to the media of Riibe's conversation with Dominican authorities. Hey, the stories we cover here on Law and Crime prove that the world is unpredictable and having a great attorney matters. So let's bring in our partner and sponsor, Morgan & Morgan. This is a law firm with more than 1,000 attorneys and a history of winning. Let me run through some of their wins in just the past couple of months. They secured a $9.3 million verdict for a car crash victim in Florida, $5.6 million for a car accident victim in Atlanta, and $1.8 million in Kentucky. And in that case, the insurance company was only going to offer $5,000. So even if you don't think your case is worth millions of bucks, why not fight for what you deserve? Morgan & Morgan makes it so easy. You can do it with 8 clicks on your phone. So if you've been injured, start your claim today. Head over to forthepeople.com/OTC. You can also find a link in the description section of this video. Now, I talked about that white cover-up just a short time ago that you saw Sudiksha wearing as she walked through the lobby. This is where that comes into play. Dominican media outlet CDN posted these pictures of what's believed to be that item of clothing found on a beach chair. There were sandals that were also reportedly found. So this raises some questions about whether Sudiksha ever made it back to shore. It's still unclear where she went or what happened. The surveillance video shows Riibe returning to the hotel at 9:55 a.m. by himself. That's after he says he woke up on the beach. And according to that transcript, Riibe told investigators that when he returned to the hotel, he went to his friend's room to get his phone, then went to his own room to sleep. Now, there are questions about his account of that night. I do want to note that he has not been named a suspect, and this is not a criminal investigation at this point. Dominican authorities say he is a witness to a missing persons case. But at the end of his interview, Riibe said, quote, "The next day I found my things because I never picked them up, but someone had stolen my shoes and the key card to my room." Riibe never mentions having to go to the lobby to get a new key, so it's unclear how he was able to get into his room to sleep if he didn't have a key card. Riibe also didn't mention just how much he had apparently been drinking that night. We see him at the bar throwing up, but he told investigators it was all the seawater he drank when he was trying to rescue Sudiksha. Then there's the part of the interview where he refused to answer several questions from investigators. The questions were, quote, "What do you think about the disappearance? Did you know the young woman? Do you remember if the young woman made any gestures or screamed while in the sea? Did you report to authorities or the hotel what happened with you and the girl on the beach? Did you tell your friend what happened with you and the girl on the beach?" All of which the report says Josh Riibe answered, quote, "My lawyers advised me not to answer that question, and I will rely on them." The report said investigators told Riibe he had a right not to answer questions, and authorities noted that he had 2 attorneys present for this interview. Riibe has appeared cooperative with investigators in this search. This is video that Noticias SIN took showing Riibe with investigators, as there are also pictures of him speaking with the authorities on the beach, walking authorities through what he says happened. But we also just learned that Riibe may not have much of a choice when it comes to staying in the Dominican Republic. According to ABC News, Dominican authorities have seized Riibe's passport and say they're looking into possible inconsistencies in his story. Law enforcement in the Dominican Republic has maintained he's a witness in a missing persons case, not a suspect in a criminal case. Konanki lived outside Washington, D.C. Her local sheriff in Loudon County named Riibe a person of interest in her disappearance. According to ABC News, Riibe's lawyer says he's not allowed to leave that all-inclusive hotel that he and Sudiksha were staying at freely, and he has to be accompanied by police. Riibe is a student at St. Cloud State University in Minnesota, and he is a native of tiny Round Rock, Iowa. And that community is standing by him as he has become the center of this story, and it's one that has gained traction around the world. The Loundon County Sheriff's Office in Iowa posted this statement on behalf of Riibe's friends over the weekend. It reads, quote, "The Rock Rapids community stands behind and supports Joshua Riibe and his family. The Riibe family moved to town in 2015 and has been active in various school and community events and organizations. They are well known and loved. Josh has an unwavering devotion to his faith and a genuine kindness towards others. He exemplifies the values of compassion, respect, and integrity that are fundamental to our church and our community. We ask that you respect the Riibe family's privacy during this difficult time of uncertainty. while Josh focuses his efforts to help find Sudiksha Konanki. His family at home is providing support to their loved ones in the Dominican Republic. Please help us respect those priorities. And it's signed by the friends of Joshua Riibe's family. Josh Riibe did make a brief statement himself to a reporter at NBC News while at the resort. He said, quote, "I'm just trying to help them out," adding, "The ocean is a dangerous place," end quote. The FBI and other U.S. law enforcement agencies are assisting authorities in the Dominican Republic in their search for Konanki. Even though the resort that Konanki and Riibe were staying at did not have cameras on the beach itself, it is next to other all-inclusive resorts that do have cameras that can give you an idea of what the location is like. Take a look at this video. This is from the Hard Rock Punta Cana's webcam that's on their website. This all-inclusive resort where Konanki went missing says it is cooperating with the investigation. It put out a statement saying, quote, "The Riu staff acted appropriately upon being notified of the disappearance, fulfilling their duty to inform the authorities with whom, as expected, cooperation has been absolute. Riu is also fully committed to offering any support that the young woman's family may require during these difficult days. Everyone at Riu shares their pain, and our thoughts and prayers are with Sudiksha C. Konanki and her family." Konanki's father is in the Dominican Republic during this search. He's called for investigators to continue looking at the possibility of a kidnapping or an abduction. Konanki is a 20-year-old student at the University of Pittsburgh. Her family says that she went on spring break with her friends ahead of her plans to study pre-med in the spring with hopes of one day working in a career in medicine. Joining us now is criminal defense attorney Mauricio Padilla. Thank you for taking the time to be with us today. What do you make of this story thus far from what you've been able to gather as this search has continued?
Listen, I've reviewed the article that gives the in-depth explanation of the other gentleman that was with her. I think the issue is that it's very detailed. And then his explanation of what occurred is so incredibly detailed, but then he says he threw up, fell asleep on the beach, and woke up hours later, which would indicate that maybe you have been drinking a lot because it was like 5 o'clock in the morning and they're on vacation. So it just doesn't sound plausible that after suffering what you suffered and you fell asleep for hours and hours, that you were sober enough to remember in the details that he describes what occurred to him and this poor girl.
Yeah, and it's fascinating because he's not a suspect. It's not a criminal investigation at this point. It's a missing persons case. He's considered a witness by Dominican authorities. But at the same time, there are these questions that have come up about how he can remember so many specifics about what he was doing, but then when it comes to where she is, he doesn't seem to have, a recollection of the last time that he saw her and where she went. So that's raised a lot of questions. For you as a criminal defense attorney, he ends up getting a lawyer. And for many people, they see that and they wonder if that's, is that a red flag that there's something more going on here? What do you make of the fact that this American college student, who's this person of interest in this missing persons case, decided to get a lawyer?
Well, anybody should get a lawyer, regardless of whether you're guilty or not. Getting a lawyer is not an admission of guilt, and it's actually the smart thing to do anywhere in the world, especially if you're in a jurisdiction that's not your home, because you need somebody to protect your rights and to guide you through, the traumatic events that's happening. What my issue with it is his version, and his version is like assisting him, and it's explaining how by the last time that he saw her, she was out of the water walking. So it kind of like, it helps his version of events and makes sure that everybody knows that the last time that I saw her, she was walking on the beach. But then he sleeps for, he's missing for several hours, which I don't think it's consistent with someone that would have gone through the traumatic events that he's describing. So more, the issue that he got an attorney, I don't think is an admission of guilt, or anybody should look at that as such. I think the big problem here is that he's trying to explain away something that isn't really jiving with common sense, what he's saying.
How do these investigations typically work where at this point there's not a crime? It's a missing person. We don't know where she is. It's not a criminal investigation as of yet. His passport has been taken by Dominican authorities, so he can't leave. How do you expect something to happen? What could be the next steps in all of this?
Well, I'm listen, like it happens in the United States, everywhere they're gonna conduct an investigation. I'm pretty sure they're gonna ask him if he wants to take a polygraph test. That's probably what they would do in the United States. They're gonna ask for his cell phones. They're gonna interview all the people that knew them. They're gonna interview friends about the relationships that they had. They're gonna look at text messages to see if there was any type of romantic relationship, if he wanted a romantic relationship and she didn't, etc. They're gonna try and look for motives why this may have occurred. And in the meanwhile, the exhaustive search for her, the issue is that the waters in and around, the Dominican Republic sometimes are not the best for search and rescue. Those it's not by any means, an easy ocean. Like I'm from Miami, like the ocean there is not the same as it is in Dominican Republic or in Puerto Rico where I currently live. Like the oceans here, they could totally drag you in. So I'm not saying that it's not possible that she drowned. I'm just saying that his extensive explanation is casting more doubt than absolving him of guilt at this moment. And as far as the investigation goes, they're going to interview everybody. They're going to interview him. Without a body, it's difficult, but it's not impossible. So he still has to deal with the Dominican authorities and see where it goes from there.
What would be your advice to him if he was your client?
Don't say anything. Like the fact that what he already said is going to be used against him. So, it's hard because sometimes people that I represent are accused of horrible things, and they want to come out and say that they didn't do it, and it's sometimes very difficult for me to explain to them that even though you want to explain your innocence, that as an attorney, I have to tell you not to talk because anything you say can and will be used against you. And many times people are not savvy enough to understand that you're saying something that's going to be used against you. And this particular case, it illustrates that. His detailed explanation at this point is hurting him more than helping him. So if he was going to be like, I'm not going to say anything, it'd be better off for him.
How do you balance, on one hand, not saying anything more because he's given these details at this point that have been, it's raised a lot of questions. I mean, the entire world seems to be dissecting everything that he said, and that's been leaked through to Dominican media outlets and American media outlets. But then at the same time, if he doesn't say something, then you would have the same group of people looking at this story and being like, he is hiding what actually happened.
Yeah, but listen, one thing is for people to think bad. Listen, they're going to think the worst about you. When a girl goes missing and you're the last person that was seen with her, you're suspect number one. Okay. Now, whether or not that's just the way it is. If you have an explanation that doesn't, that passes the muster or whatever, like maybe you can go ahead and try and help the investigation. But what he's saying at this point is really hurting him. And sometimes people have to think about, what do I care more about, the way the public sees me or whether or not I'm going to get charged with murder in a foreign country and spend the rest of my life here. So it's hard. It's a hard decision, and I deal with it all the time. I represent people that are charged with horrible things, and they want to cooperate with the investigation. But unfortunately, my job as an attorney is to alert them that, listen, when you sit in front of a detective, he's not there to help you. He's not there to help you. He's there to ask questions and to eventually charge you with a crime. And the issue is that people need to understand that. Like I know that many people want to come forward, they want to cooperate, but a lot of times that cooperation is a double-edged sword.
You're from Miami, you live in Puerto Rico now. I grew up on the East Coast on the ocean as well. And there's part of his story that stood out to me. And it's this dramatic detail of a rescue where he has the girl under his arm and he's swimming through a rip current that they were swept away from. And then he makes it to shore and he places her down in front of him. How skilled of a swimmer would you have to be able to pull off a rescue like that, knowing the waters in the Dominican Republic, if they were actually, like he says, ripped away by a wave and then dragged out to sea?
Well, this is literally happened to me twice. I'm the kind of person with my OCD that I try to go against the rip current. So you can't do that. You got to let it take you all the way to its natural ending point and then swim from there. It's highly unlikely what he's saying. And then if you factor in that it's 5 something in the morning, they're going to look at the videos to see how much they drank, because if you are hammered, that's an impossible scenario.
Yeah.
If you are hammered, drunk, and people know that you were drinking, even for a sober person, that could be an impossible scenario. But clearly, if they were both intoxicated, what he's saying is not, is not something that's plausible. And I think it's going to be used against them. And it also has this whole sense of he's making himself the hero. Like, I did this, I swam with her, I put her, okay, so then what? And then you passed out for 2 hours? Why did you pass out? Because I had taken in so much water. Okay, but is that enough to say, like, and you can get medical professionals, if someone took in a lot of water and they have been drinking and they were put through this traumatic experience, would that cause them to pass out for several hours? Because passing out for several hours is medically, like, I don't know, it's a big thing, right? Like,
right.
Especially after what you just described. You weren't like injected by ketamine. Yeah, you had been drinking. You're allegedly were competent enough and sober enough to rescue this girl in the harrowing fashion that you described. But then all of a sudden, you pass out for several hours. That is the worst thing that he has said in his story, and that's going to be highly scrutinized. And he's going to have to eventually, at this point, if he got a lawyer now, I'm pretty sure the lawyer is advising him not to make any further statements.
Yeah, because to your point with the rip current, that is the advice that people give. Is it's not you can't beat a rip current in a lot of cases. It's when you're swept away, you have to. That's just kind of like knowledge people have when they're in the ocean. You didn't really hear him give that statement. I know he says he was hit by a wave. I don't know if it was specifically a rip current, but it sounds like from what he was describing. How long could he be held? I mean, his passport was taken by Dominican authorities. It's not a crime.
Yeah.
What type of timeline? Because I think that there is another part of this is he's an American college student. There's no crime at this point. How long can he be detained in a foreign country?
I don't want to answer that question because it has to do probably a lot with the Dominican laws that are in place. I'm sure similar to every country, there's a limit, but right now they're investigating a missing person. The whole world is watching, so there's going to be a point where they're going to charge him or not charge him.
Yeah.
So I don't know the number of days. I don't want to give you the wrong information.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. It is a missing persons case right now. Want to thank Mauricio Padilla for taking the time to be with us, joining us from Puerto Rico. Appreciate your time as always.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much.
For On the Case, presented by Law&Crime, I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.